Welcome, everybody, to the U.S. Soccer Podcast. David Goss and Alejandro Bedoya with you for the official podcast of the United States Soccer Federation. We've had some incredible conversations in the short time that we have run this show. We have covered the sport from every angle, and we are excited for what we have in store for you on this episode. We are going to be talking to the commissioner of the largest and longest professional soccer league in America in Major League Soccer. And of course, that is Commissioner Don Garber. He has been working on soccer and growing it in the US and around the world for a long time. And we cannot wait to get into that conversation. Alejandro, you grew up at a time when MLS already existed, but just recently you went and played your professional career in Europe. Then you came back to Major League Soccer and you've been in the MLS ranks for a long time now. What do you make of, as we head towards the 2026 World Cup, where this league stands right now and what the experience is like in it?
Yeah, well, absolutely. I think the league stands at an inflection point, right, leading into the 26 World Cup. What's going to come after that? But definitely now, I've been in the league now 10 years since I got here, 2016 to Philadelphia Union. You brought up me as a kid watching MLS games. At that time, I was actually rooting and going to Miami Fusion games. If folks who have been following the league for a while recall, yeah, back in the day. And there's a new iteration of the Miami team, right? Inter Miami. Literally, they're playing right now at that site where they used to play with this new stadium. But it's just very exciting. The league has come a long ways. Commissioner Garber has definitely been at the helm for a long, long time, and a large reason for this growth. It's exciting. I speak to a lot of my colleagues and former teammates who when they first came into the league, just look at the salary structure, right? They were getting paid. There's guys getting paid now more than what some teams' salary cap was at that time when they came into the league. So, that's one growth phase of it. The next is just the expansion of the teams, right? In just 10 years, I believe the league has expanded, has grown to 12 more teams they've added since 2015, I believe. Yeah, which is incredible growth. It's this infrastructure, the stadiums, the training grounds, the training facility, the amount of investment coming into the league has grown significantly. It's exciting times to be not just a player, but I think a fan, a follower of the league, and it's just loved hearing from the Commissioner Garber about his thoughts and some of the insights.
It's going to be an incredible interview. We had such a fun time. So many interesting conversations that we had with the commissioner. So let's dig into that right now. Well, we've had a lot of great conversations here on the U.S. Soccer Podcast, and we are very excited about our next. We are going to be talking to the longtime commissioner of Major League Soccer, the largest professional soccer league in the United States, Mr. Don Garber himself. Commissioner, thanks for joining us.
You got it, David. It's actually the largest professional soccer league in the world.
I was trying to be as complimentary as possible, and I knew I wouldn't fully get there, so I'm glad you're here to clean it up.
There you go.
So it is
kicking us off.
It is the largest league in the world, and it has been running for 30 seasons, a huge landmark for the league. Looking back on the 3 decades of the league so far, what are you most proud of?
Well, I don't think there's a single thing. Listen, I've got a current player who's played for our country, played for our league, played for, started as a kid playing in youth soccer, and now looking at, being a professional athlete and beyond as a media person. Some of the things that make me proudest is seeing our players not just performing on the field, but making a career in the sport. When I came into MLS, most American players, and not all of them, were overseas. And now we've got generations of players that have come through the ranks. Obviously, when the league was started, David, there were no stadiums for anybody to play in. And now, stadiums are training grounds. We'll probably talk about the one that I met Alejandro out last month. The whole foundation, the building blocks, the infrastructure, the soft content and the power content, what we can do with media, but also what we do every day with our games. is generational. Makes me very proud. So I wouldn't say it's a single thing.
As you look back, though, 30 years, a long time. There are a lot of decisions you've been a part of, the league's been a part of. Is there anything you look back and say, I would have done that one differently?
Yeah, I think any leader of any business, particularly if you've been doing it a long time, if you can't have the courage or at least the strength of character to look back and say, man, I got a lot wrong, hopefully more right than wrong. And boy, if you could live life by knowing what's going to happen, we'd all be playing, games in Las Vegas or doing the lotto or doing a whole bunch of things that would allow us to, set a future with a game plan. Uh, I can't even begin to tell you how many decisions I'd probably do differently. Most of it really is about preparation. When I think about, what happened with Messi with the All-Star game, that could have been handled better by everybody if we had planned better, if the league had planned better, if the club had planned better, if better communication came from Messi's camp, then we would have avoided a negative situation. So even after all these years, I try to remind everybody in our shop, let's learn from the things that don't go right and try to prepare, so the next time it happens, we can get it right. But boy, that happens almost every day.
Commissioner Garber, speaking of many, many years, MLS was formed as part of the World Cup coming here back in '94, right? And now, together with Canada and Mexico, we're hosting the 2026 competition. We know the legacy of the '94 World Cup was the foundation of this league. What do you think should be the legacy coming out of 2026?
I think it's more interest overall in the game, right? And whether it's the Men's World Cup or the Women's World Cup, we still, as a sport, are trying to find our way. Where are the big moments that could break through so that, we're talked about culturally and, in the late night talk shows or at the water cooler or throughout social media and MLS or when it's the Women's World Cup, I'm sure the NWSL will feel the same way. Well, we're the center part of that conversation. So, Alejandro, I don't think there's any shortage of interest in the game. Right? The '94 World Cup was the most successful World Cup of all time, and it'll be eclipsed by the '26 World Cup. But how do we connect all that with those that are really trying to build the game for a better future? Better opportunities for professional players, more opportunities for youth players, perhaps less pay to play, better infrastructure, both at the youth level and at the professional level. And I think the overall interest in the World Cup is going to help drive that. All the research we've done is every time there's been a World Cup in the modern era, going back to 2002, when MLS obviously was here in '98, but '02, '06, South Africa 10 and et cetera, those domestic leagues have grown by 15 to 20% in overall interest. And that's just data that research data. So I expect people will become more interested in MLS. But how do we get somebody who's engaging with a national team celebration to now be a fan of one of our clubs? And that's just work. We've got to do the work. We've got to have great fan fest. We've got to have great contact. We've got to link our players that are playing for their national teams. We have to put MLS in the middle of the conversation. And if we do that, then I think overall the league will ultimately benefit. And it won't just be a Taylor Swift concert. I worry about that. You just don't want it to be something big. You want it to be something big, long-lasting, and legacy-making and meaningful.
Right. And speaking of growing the league, you mentioned a couple ideas. Are there stated goals the league is looking for or certain KPIs perhaps that you can share that you're looking to accomplish because of the World Cup?
Well, we're careful about KPIs because, we have those KPIs throughout, our normal course of business. How do we want to grow our attendance, our viewership? How do we want to grow our commercial business? How do we want to raise revenue overall for, the overall MLS enterprise? So you'd like to see a lift from that, but I think the lift has to be generational. I don't think we could say that in 2027 or 2028, MLS will look much different than it does during 2026. But I hope 10 years later, just like today, there are very few of our fans who've grown up without Major League Soccer in their lives. Our average fan base is under 30 years old. MLS is 30 years old. So MLS has been a part of their life from the time that they were born. So we want to be able to have MLS be inculcated or connected into the culture of people's lives, particularly if they like the game. And then the World Cup is just the rocket fuel that'll give it a bit more energy as opposed to a moment of truth, because that's just a spike. You want to have it be something that is quite tangible. And, I mentioned some of the things that our teams are doing. There'll be advertising campaigns, marketing campaigns that will put MLS with it into, the awareness of the much larger audience. Our clubs are very involved. Many of them are host cities, but those are not. We'll be able to do viewing parties and other fan events. And there's a long list of those kinds of activities. And I'm sure, this is a U.S. soccer podcast. I'm sure U.S. soccer is thinking about the same thing.
As a commissioner, I assume you don't really get to root for teams very often. You are neutral across most of the games you go to, but I assume the national team is a little bit different. As you take away the commissioner role, how does Don Garber, the fan, watch games? Do you get emotional? Do you get caught up? Like, what is your USMNT, USWNT match day tradition?
Yeah, it's a good question. I certainly root for MLS or cheer and support MLS teams when we're playing in the MLS All-Star game against Liga MX or playing as we are these weeks in Leagues Cup. I'm up every night watching those games and hoping that our teams can prevail. And obviously, I've been on this board of U.S. Soccer for 26 years, so I'm a ardent fan of both the men's team and the women's team. I can take off my league hat and become just a fan, no different than you and Ollie and anybody else. I'm a patriot. That being said, Canada plays in our league, and I'm very supportive of the Canadian national team. I want them to do well. We've done very well with our academies in Vancouver, Montreal, and Toronto. More players from MLS teams in Canada play for the national team than American players do. So, I feel very close to the Canadian national team as well.
I know you mentioned earlier how this is a U.S. soccer podcast, so I have to ask you, what is your favorite memory of watching the U.S.?
I've got a great one, Alejandro, and it's early. It's very early in my career. I was in Korea, and I was at a men's national team game. It was against Portugal, and a bunch of guys in the office, and I went at that time. MLS, through its sister company, Soccer United Marketing, actually did the media, the broadcasting, and the sponsorship in the English language in the U.S. So we had a commercial, reason of being very involved in '02 and '06. But I remember that game like it was yesterday, and beating Portugal, kind of like Miami beating Porto. It was one of those big, big, big events. And ultimately, I look up, and Lamar Hunt is about a section above me. I'm sitting in the VIP seats, and Lamar just bought a ticket, and he was traveling around with his son Clark and other son Dan. And I remember seeing him after the game. We took a picture together. I have that picture in my office. But I've been to, other than 2014, I had reasons that I needed to miss the World Cup in 2014. But some of my best memories in my professional career are going to the World Cup. South Africa was a life experience. Germany was a real life experience. Moscow was incredible. Qatar, I thought, was a great World Cup. And I can go as a member of the U.S. contingent. So it's pretty cool.
It is.
Yeah, no, that is.
I was going to say it's the most Lamar Hunt thing ever that he's just buying a ticket to go watch a soccer game.
It's funny. He said to me after the game, I saw you in a car going to the game, and I got on the bus, and guess what? We both got there at the same time. So Lamar is an absolute legend in his humility, and I'll remember that like it was yesterday. And I have a bunch of toys too. I remember in South Africa buying the vuvuzelas, and I have them in my office. And the World Cup is a great celebration. That's why I think most people don't realize how incredible it's going to be here in Canada, Mexico, and the U.S. It's going to be big. It's dozens and dozens of Super Bowls, right? And you've heard Gianni Infantino talk about it. You heard the President of the United States talk about it. You hear Cindy and JT, and you hear me talk about it. It's going to be big, and it's going to be exciting for all of us that are part of the game.
Ollie, I think we're going to get you back on the field for this one at this point.
It's going to be mad. It'll be the biggest World Cup to date, for sure, guaranteed.
So if we get you at these games, do you get a jersey? Like if you're at a U.S. World Cup game or a Canadian World Cup game in the U.S. or Canada, what's the line to get you over there? Is it a semifinal, a final? Are you drinking a beer in the stands?
It's a good question, David. I mean, it's probably not the most interesting part of this, but I always go in the beginning, because I go to the U.S. games for the last, half a dozen World Cups, and then I generally come back for the semifinals and the finals. Here in the U.S., MLS is going to be involved in the hospitality for the World Cup, so we'll be very busy like we were during the Club World Cup, but, I'll probably be less of a fan and more really doing what I'll need to do and entertain politicians and sponsors and whatnot. So it's good to have it on our soil.
Commissioner, going back to now your working world, where do you see MLS in 30 years from now? What will the league look like?
I wish I had a definitive answer to that. And I could say just about anything because 30 years is a long time. And based on how old I am, the likelihood of me being around is next to zero. So, I do believe that MLS can be one of the top leagues in the world, if not the top league in the world. And you see what's going on now, just signing Sun, announcement going on. I think it went on just a few minutes ago. Some of the better players in the world want to be here. Question is, when do we have them here? Some of the best young American players, young Canadian players coming up through our academies want to be here. Some of them stay, some of them get sold on just like the rest of the world. Our facilities are among the best in the world. Our training grounds, the one in Philadelphia, I think is one of the best in the world. So what we're really missing is how could we compete on the field against the best clubs in the world? And that's really, Alejandro, just about money. It's just about how big can MLS be from a business perspective to generate enough revenue to be able to do what all leagues do, which is pay players the vast majority of the money you earn. And if we're able to do that, able to create a dynamic where MLS is a much bigger enterprise, I think just based on how good it is to live in our country, how popular our culture is, whether it's music, or whether it's entertainment, it's our facilities, it's the health and welfare of our population. Overall, I see no reason why our league can't be a dominant league. I really don't. I think the only thing that's holding us back is our ability to fund salary budgets that they could fund at the top levels in the 5, 6 top European leagues.
Yes, I absolutely agree with that. And you just mentioned Sun to LAFC, and we also saw officially announced this morning Thomas Müller, right, joining the Whitecaps. So that's two huge announcements, signings for the league. What does that mean for the league and the kind of talent that you're able to attract?
Listen, it used to be. I think about this a lot because there's a lot been going on this month. With Messi playing super well and Miami doing well in the Club World Cup. All the discussions with Sun, which went on for some time. Thomas Müller has been trying to come to MLS since he left Bayern. And I've thought about, how does that fit with the other players that have come in? If I ever get asked the question, is this year bigger, the last couple of years bigger than back in the day? And I don't think so, Alejandro. It's just like particularly when you've been doing this a long time, you have different chapters of this book, right? And in the early chapters, bringing about Tab Ramos and John Harkes and Alexi and getting Claudio to come back. And then it was getting Thierry Henry and Guatemala Blanco and Christos Stoichkov. And when I went to many of these Club World Cup matches and seeing Kaká and Yuri Djorkaeff and some of the biggest names in the world that played in Major League Soccer. And then I was thinking just today, because I knew we were going to have this podcast, we brought back Josie, we signed Clint, Michael Bradley came back, Landon came back. If you think about all the great players that have come to Major League Soccer, I don't think the league gets enough credit for that. You know what? They're too old or they're too young or they're selling them too young or this guy, Kevin Sullivan is a superstar, but he's going to be training in Man City. We eat our young in the soccer business, right? And particularly here in the United States. I think when you take a step back and you look at the overall player pool, the core of our league being our American players and all the great international players that have been here, it's remarkable. It really is. So I think that you'll see more and more of that in the years to come. I
You
really
talk
do.
about Josie and of course Michael and all those signings. A lot of that happened around the 2014 World Cup. It felt like a sort of stated plan of how can we take advantage of the 2014 World Cup for Major League
Mm.
Soccer, and that was something that the clubs went out and executed. Is there a similar plan for 2026?
That's a great question, David. We it started in '02 and '06. We had the MLS Strike Force. We had Clint Mathis, and I think Clint was part of that. And we very intentionally, Brian McBride was part. We very intentionally went out and said, let's be sure we sign a bunch of American players who we know will be on the national team. Well, now we have players that play for 80 national teams, right? I think we were in the top five. Our comms guy told me we're in the top five in Qatar for a league with national team players that played in the World Cup. So, the league is very international. It's the most international, certainly, of all the North American leagues. And while I want our players to be playing for the U.S. team, and I'm sure Alejandro, the pride for you, the pride for me when I see our guys. Just saw a front page article for Diego Luna in yesterday's New York Times. I mean, I love that. But you also love when you see, a guy like, I mean, think about, I'm not picking the Argentinian national team, but I hope Messi and Rodrigo de Paul are on, and we could have two players on the Argentinian national team. I mean, that's pretty good. So we have to spread and widen our perspective and not think of this league, though it is our domestic first division league. We have to think of it in a global environment. We'll talk about our Apple deal. It's why we're so focused in having all of our games broadcast globally. So somebody in Germany could see them as easily as somebody could see them in Philly. And that's the perspective that we have with MLS that really I don't think any other North American league has. I do think the Premier League has it. I know the La Liga and Serie A and the French League all want that. Germany's been trying to do that, hasn't been able to achieve that quite as well. Not quite sure why. It's a great, great, great league. So I look at things in a much more holistic perspective and just count the number of national team players, not just the number of American players.
Is that then a focus going into next year of saying we know the Colombias and the Algerias and the Koreas will be here? We want to make sure that we have ties to those teams?
No, it was back in the day. It's not today. Our team's going to sign the best players they possibly can. And generally, the best players are playing for the national team. So it's kind of cause and effect, right? Back in the day, we actually had to have a stated strategy, because if we didn't have that strategy, and back in the day, nobody knew anything, right? So we were signing players. We had to figure it out. We had models and we did research, and we changed our rules when we wanted to sign David Beckham because we thought that we needed to go out and sign more international players that had bigger names. And today, our clubs are going to sign the players that they think will be the best, make their team the most competitive, connected the best locally with their fan base, and perform at the highest level. And if you're performing at the highest level, you ought to be playing for your national team.
And speaking of playing for your national team, Commissioner, a World Cup obviously means a lot more visibility, more interest in the game. But how do you retain new fans and get them to watch MLS and go into the games?
Well, there's no easy, but again, it's kind of like the question you asked before. If you knew the answer to that, then this would be science, not art, right? You could plan, and it really is about having each of our teams ensuring that they're connected in those markets where games are being played. It's the league having a proper marketing campaign to say, this is the same game and this is your league, right? We've had so many great ad campaigns over, the last 25 years. And basically it's like saying, it's right here. This great game that you love, that you were so passionate about, getting up in the middle of the night if you were watching a World Cup in a different time zone, or now traveling to a World Cup venue in one of these 3 North American countries. And when that leaves, I want you to be a Philadelphia Union fan, a Seattle Sounders fan, a Vancouver Whitecaps fan, a FC Dallas fan, and our clubs, Alejandro, your team is working really hard on that. And the good thing about MLS today is it used to be top down, because we kind of started all this. Nobody really knew a whole lot about it. And now we don't have to do that quite the way we did in the past. Now it's more bottom up. empower your teams to hire a guy like Tim McDermott, who's a great chief business officer, and be sure we have the right sporting directors, be sure we have the right focus on strategic planning and research so that our clubs have the right information to do proper targeted marketing. How do we think about artificial intelligence and data so that, we're involved in the hospitality not because we're trying to sell hot dogs. We're trying to have a relationship with those folks that are coming in, have access to their data and their information, not so that we can do anything untoward, but so we can talk to them and just say, hey, you loved going to that game in Houston. How about this opportunity with the Houston Dynamo? And connecting those dots is what makes it, important. And it's just going to be how well can we execute. It's no different than what you do in game prep. Sometimes you can prepare really hard, the ball doesn't bounce your way. We got to eliminate as many unforced errors as we can and just try to get as much in place so when it happens, we're rocking and rolling.
You mentioned, of course, the global nature of the player pool and the global nature of the Apple TV deal, and it's been a huge talking point that I've watched 18 interviews with you about it over the last few weeks and few months, and we've gotten more information here and there as it's gone along. But there's been a lot of question marks around it about whether it was the right move for the league and how it's working out. What do you make of sort of those questions and where it all stands right now?
Well, I think if you don't take risks and you don't have courage in running a business, then MLS is still an emerging business. It's hard for everybody who's been around it. You've worked at the league, and Alejandro, you played in the league a long time. So you think about the fact that we're only 30 years old and the other leagues are over 100, right? We're still trying to chart the right path for us as opposed to going from strength to strength. We're trying to build our strength. And media, obviously, is a core value, core equity of any professional sports league. And we were a second thought for most of the media partners that we've had over the years. I think the most important thing that doesn't get talked about enough is before the Apple deal, we had 60 different start times and schedule days in 2022. 60. How is any fan supposed to know when to watch a game? So when the NFL is playing, when baseball is playing, that in certain nights there's going to be hockey night in America or a hockey night in Canada, whatever it might be. And we needed to narrow that down. So rather than have a game that a broadcaster would tell us, hey, the only window we have for you in Dallas is 12 o'clock noon in August, and that's when you need to play your game. Well, that's not a good way to manage your product, right? So we wanted first to be sure that we had the right ability to manage our schedule. We can do that with a streaming partner, and Apple's been great in that regard. The second is we had all these local games. So remember, MLS only had about 100 national games. We had 500 local games, and those local games were all over the place. Time-wise, media distribution-wise, we wanted to take all of them and treat every local game like a national game. Its production value, its promotion, its marketing, the Apple deal provides us with that opportunity. We have the benefit of having a great technology partner. What we need to work on collectively is how do we ensure that enough people have access to our games? Is the subscription package the right approach? Is it priced right? Should we even have a subscription? And I said it in our interview, you probably saw it, try to tone out all of the pundits. We've got to focus in on what we think is right and adapt if it's not. And that's where we are with Apple. They've been great partners for us.
How does the process work of that conversation, that adaptation of the parties involved?
A lot of meetings, a lot of discussions. They're very focused. They're sports fans. They come to our board meetings. An Apple guy sits on one of our business committees. He's smart, loves soccer. They're committed. They're partners of ours. So a lot of meetings, a lot of discussions, a lot of research, a lot of fan, forums and fan panels. We're happy to be in a world where we can control the production of our games. I think all of you would agree. Nobody argues that the games aren't really well produced and that they're really easy to access. Well, I watch these Leagues Cup games. I've got 6 screens going on. One screen with 4 games. I got an iPad, and then I've got phone. I could watch 6 games at once.
I'm just curious here, since we mentioned this and we're talking Apple TV, are the signings today, are they indicative, like Son and Müller, are they indicative of the strategy and overall vision of growing The global
Yes.
reach of MLS for Apple TV?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, they are. So, listen, baseball could back into it with Ohtani, right? It's not like they said, let's go sign Ohtani so that we can have a lot of fans in Japan. And the guy's Babe Ruth, right? So we have to go out and we have to make those decisions, Alejandro. So, I never thought we'd have a guy like Son playing in our league. He's one of the best players in the Premier League. He won a trophy last year. He's super personable. He's got playing in LA with a massive Korean population. You all might remember after the Korea World Cup, we signed a guy named Heung-Bo was his last name, was the defender, was the captain of the Korean national team. Alejandro, I think you were still in high school in 2002.
I was.
But, you are, man. See, so, there always are going to be those kinds of strategic signings. But he was signed because he's a good player. He's a good player. I think if anybody thinks they're signing somebody out of marketing, then, that's you'll get caught. You got to start with quality, and then how do you make those decisions in a way that makes sense from a business perspective?
Speaking of 30 years of the league, if we look back on the beginning of MLS and the present, and even from the time when I joined the league in 2016, one massive change is the infrastructure, the stadiums. Talk us through what fans can expect in the next few years, because there are some exciting new stadiums coming along. If you look at New York, Miami, obviously the renderings and the plans in Chicago.
So, I think what I love about fans is it's like being, I'm a foodie. So I love going to good restaurants. And I know enough. I've invested in restaurants. I have a friend who's a restaurateur. Somebody we both know well, Alejandro, who was in the restaurant business in Philly. So it's kind of a hobby of mine. I might go to a restaurant differently than the average person, but most of the time you make a reservation, you show up, you sit down, you order a drink, you want to have a good meal, and nothing else really matters. It just has to work. But the restaurant has to get built. You've got to have the right, menu. You've got to have the right ingredients. You have to have the right chef. In MLS, we had to build it off from scratch. I grew up in New York City, right? Shea Stadium and Yankee Stadium it's no different than the Empire State Building. Right? It's just there. Nobody ever thought there wouldn't be a baseball stadium, right? Or MetLife, it was Giant Stadium back in the day. But we had to start from scratch. So when I look at the Home Depot Center, now Dignity Health in 2003, and then Dallas and Colorado, 2004, 2005, Toronto coming in and Salt Lake coming in, and the evolution of our buildings is really one of the stories that is sort of established the foundation that MLS was able to build upon. And every year it gets better and better. I feel bad for St. Louis. St. Louis's facility is world class. World class. I mean, if you guys haven't seen it, it's amazing. It's redefining downtown St. Louis. But it came in where a lot of other great stadiums. So people say, oh, well, we've got a beautiful stadium in St. Louis. So it's expected now. St. Louis City goes to fans go and they just say, of course we have a beautiful stadium. What we've lacked is having that in our largest markets, right? Red Bull Arena came in back in, I think it was 2008 or so. It's a beautiful, now Sports Illustrated Stadium, a beautiful, beautiful building standing the test of time. We've needed a stadium in New York. We need one in Chicago. We need one in Miami. By the way, we need one in Boston. When we achieve all of that, and we'll have 3 of those 4, it's going to be a whole new era for MLS, both in terms of the expense of building those buildings, because they've learned from Cincinnati, Columbus, and St. Louis. They've learned from Nashville and seen how buildings get built and what you could learn. Your first question, how do you learn from your mistakes? New York City, I've worked on that almost my whole career here. We've been working on that way before we had NYCFC. The Moss family are beasts. What they've done in a year and a half in Miami. I mean, we're going to have a world-class stadium in Miami, downtown. And then obviously Joe Mansueto and what he's doing in Chicago will be a game changer. So I think when this is all done, then the Crafts are on the clock, right? They'll be the last one. They've been working on this for 10 years, working really hard, by the way. And then we're pretty much done in our stadium building chapter. And then it's, What's next?
I can see the Miami Stadium from my window, by the way. So I'm excited for that to be a quick trip for me. And it's gone, as you said, it's gone up incredibly fast. Let me ask you as a
Yeah,
follow up
it's
to that. You say
amazing.
what's next? A lot of these buildings, it's incredible. You go, you feel the energy. I've said to people many times, like, if I can get you in a building at an MLS game, you'll come back. That experience is elite. The question I think around some of this, and we're seeing it with BMO in Toronto around the World Cup, is what's next would be expansion. Is there a conversation around the way these stadiums were built for the league for many at the
Yeah.
time was necessary, and then maybe there is that growth that you're hoping to push inside those buildings?
Yeah. Listen, I never thought we'd have 26 stadiums, and one of those stadiums is a redo of Columbus Crew Stadium. It was 20 years later or so that it came in. It was 20 years. So, generally stadiums have a 20-year lifetime. So maybe 18 years from now for Cincinnati, they'll think differently. Now, I'm a believer, and I think most people in the sports industry, with the exception of the NFL, perhaps college football, smaller, more intimate, more amenities, more luxury, more intimacy, more technology, more coziness, more demand is better than being larger, right? Just so you could think about the math. And I'm not sure if I could wave the magic wand, 25 was probably a magic number, not 20, because I think we've got some growth into 25. We're not averaging 25,000 fans a game. But in time, the market will take care of that. And many of these stadiums, Philly's a good example, have been built with expansion potential. So the foundation for expansion in Philadelphia exists.
Yeah, Commissioner, you've spoken a lot about the infrastructure and a lot of the excitement towards it. And I'll probably not be able to play in those new stadiums, but most likely definitely be visiting as a fan. But, MLS intends to lead through innovation, right? You recently kind of formed the MLS Innovation Lab, which I think is led by Chris Schlosser there. I'm curious to hear your thoughts of what are some of the tech companies that you feel could be transformational for MLS and also perhaps maybe for the sport in general across the globe?
Yeah, I'm going to start. It's going to seem like a inside job, but I'm going to start with Apple. I mean, I brought our owners there one day before we did our deal, and they gave us a demonstration of their sound lab and what they were thinking about with now this Atmos Dolby, and what they were thinking about with the sound experience, and how do you take sound and make it a bigger part of the fan experience. You know this so well. When I take people down on the field, they can't believe the power, the energy, the violence, the physicality, and the intensity of the game on the field as opposed to when you're watching it passively on television. So how do you replicate that through media, whether that's sound or whether that's different cameras? And so we're FIFA, by the way, has totally changed their view. Back in the day, they didn't want to do anything. Now they're innovating. They're leading with ref cameras and offside, the automated offside line. So I think you're going to see a lot more technology coming into the game. Talk about it in three phases: how we see it on air, how we experience it in our stadiums, and then through the innovation lab and things like that, Alejandro, through technology for training, health and wellness for our players, and just better use of data to be able to drive athlete performance. And those three areas are what we focus in on. We've got not a lot, but a bunch of people in the office that work on this. It's a fun and exciting part of our MLS business. We invest in many of these companies. We were one of the first ones to do VAR. I've said to Gianni Infantino, we will be your guinea pig. Let us lead, because America's like that. So you want to put cameras, microphones in the field to get sound, we'll do it, because those microphones could be the size of a pen today. I could remember doing that back in the day in our All-Star game and sneaking it in, asking for forgiveness as opposed to permission. Right? The officials used to walk around and check. Now the officials are also part of leaning into technology. You probably all seen what they did at the baseball All-Star game with an automated umpire. The world is changing in ways that have not happened in a generation. I think artificial intelligence is driving a lot of that, but also the miniaturization of devices so that you could do things that you weren't ever able to do before. And that's both for fan experience, media, and fan viewing experience, but it's also for athlete performance.
The formation of MLS, the way it's set up, one of the things that's innovative already about it is it spans two countries with the U.S. and Canada. You mentioned it, and the effect that the league has had on Canada. And then we go into this World Cup that Mexico, the U.S., and Canada are all going to co-host. And there have been times in the past where there was fear that countries sort of couldn't work together and it wouldn't work. And yet you're operating a league that already spans two of those. And there was a really close relationship with the third in the way the Liga MX and the Mexican sort of soccer setup interacts with Major League Soccer. We've got Leagues Cup right now. You mentioned the All-Star game between the two. What is the goal of that relationship, and how is it that MLS and Liga MX together can sort of be innovative and push the game as two leagues working side by side?
It's a good question. And, we don't have an answer of the end game, but we've done a lot together. Our owners get together and meet once or twice a year. So there's a lot of collaboration. You're going to start seeing more North American investment in Liga MX. There's been a lot written about that over the last couple of months. The Leagues Cup, and it's a challenge because we can't compare it to anything publicly, but our audiences for the Leagues Cup, particularly last night, were just off the charts. There's a lot of interest in those games. And you know this, Alejandro, well, right? The competitiveness of these games is off the charts. I mean, the All-Star game is competitive. You're all trying to win. And the Leagues Cup matches, I look at those games and I watch them all and I just say, man, it's not the prize money, right? It's this idea of winning for your club in a way that has an identity to it that is a little bit different than just the regular season in MLS. I think the European Champions League has been able to develop that in Europe. We're trying hard with CONCACAF to develop that with the CONCACAF Champions Cup. But this idea of a competitive, must-win city pride engagement is what our Mexico partnership is all about. I don't think there'll be a merger of the leagues. I don't think we need to. We have a merged competition. Why would you merge the league when you have a competition that's already so valuable? Maybe it changes the way it's formatted. Maybe it takes place throughout the year as opposed to just in, a 3-4 week period. But we're very bullish on the relationship.
Okay, Commissioner, this is going to sound a little bit random, but, we could talk soccer all day. But let's have a little bit of fun. I understand you like music. I know we had a conversation before about Leon Bridges in the past, but on the podcast, we recently had Emma Hayes, and she told us her favorite karaoke song was Pink Pony Club.
That's my granddaughter's.
Yeah.
No, that's.
So I have to ask you, what's your go-to karaoke song? Let's line it up a little bit here.
God, I don't know that it's I have so much. I'm a really eclectic, diverse music lover. So it depends on the mood, right? I was driving back from a meeting today and I was listening to Disclosure. I probably would say, I don't know if you know who Luther Vandross is, but he has this incredible song called The Power of Love, which is just a great hip, just funky beat song. I just I love soul music probably more than anything else, but I grew up listening to the Marshall Tucker Band and the Rolling Stones, and I go to more concerts than I probably go to sporting events. I'm going to go see a guy named Boz Scaggs in September. You guys don't know who that is, but great soul R&B guy. So I owned John this summer at somebody's house, by the way. Somebody booked him for his birthday party. But I love music. I go to Coachella when I can. I've gone through the Orleans Jazz Festival. I just love music. It's my passion, and I share that with my son, who's loves music. He's a DJ in his part time, and we have fun together.
Do we get you DJing?
I love that. I'm gonna have to check some of his music out.
No, I'm not DJing, but I listen to electronic music, and I've gone to Vegas and seen DJs. And we had an event in San Jose that Steve Aoki performed, and I just love music. I love the passion and energy of music, and there's very little I don't like. I don't like old fuddy-duddy music, But.
Moving on from music, you have what looks like a library right behind you. What would you say?
Yeah,
I don't
man.
know how many soccer books you may have up there, but what's your favorite soccer book if you had to reference one or recommend them?
I'm gonna find it. Uh, it's there's a great book and shit. Not supposed to say that on live. It's a story about. It's here on this bookshelf. It's the Miracle
San
Ascend.
Santel
There's
de
a
Castly. I've read it as well. Yeah.
that. Do you know what that is, Alejandro? The Miracle Ascend Delta Cast.
No,
It's a
but I'm going to jot this
story
down right away.
of a writer who embedded himself in a fourth division Italian club for years. I think it was David in Sicily,
Castel di Sangro. Because I knew I said it wrong. Joe McGinnis
which
is
is
the writer.
where
Yeah.
Joe
Yeah.
McGinnis, who was a very wrote Fatal Vision, very famous nonfiction writer who loved football and soccer. So he just went, he lived in Italy and went with the journey of how they were getting promoted up and what that club meant in the community and, where the organized families were. I mean, you have to read this book. You have to read this book. There early on when people would come, I would buy them that book, Come to MLS, because this will tell you what soccer could mean in a community and how even at the lowest divisions, for generations, families grow up with these clubs. That's what MLS doesn't have yet, right? So people haven't grown up with their club in a small town. I think we're going to get that over time. I think the USL's got a lot of clubs and that's going to create more fans of professional soccer. And, the future's bright. There's a lot of opportunity.
It's a great book. The writer does very well to insert himself extremely in the community, which makes it even more entertaining and even more fun. We could do this for a while, but we know you've got meetings on meetings on meetings to get to as well. So we want to close you out on this one. We started you by asking you about the World Cup's legacy and what it would be. And it's never easy to do, but we were curious about your legacy as you look back on what you've done so far and obviously what you hope to do. But, as we talk about this sport and the growth of the game, you're very central to what's happened and especially this time period. What do you make of what you will say as you walk away?
Yeah, I think I never expected to be running a league this long. So it starts with I never got into it thinking about my own personal legacy. I loved the idea of building something that would last forever, that would have an impact in communities, that people would care about, that players like I see guys like Ali and I see players in MLS league office who come off the field and they're now working in the game and this is going to be their career. So I think anybody who runs a business for a long time, history will judge their legacy. I don't in any way think about that. And I truly mean that because I never got into it for that reason. I thought it would be great to build a pro sports league that had great owners, great players, that people could make a good living, that it would be popular, that would be fun. We can have big moments and live through the agony of defeat and the trials and tribulations of a emerging business, but also have some great victories. And over time, I'll remember all of that. I think the real legacy of MLS are the people who have built it over this last generation, who may not be able to see or reap the rewards of it when MLS becomes the league we all want it to become. So I was thinking about this podcast this morning, and I think about some of the players, some of the salaries that we're paying players today. Back in the day, we have a player that now makes more money than the league's salary budget was X number of years ago. So you think about how far we've come and what impact that's had on families. And, when I step back, I'll look at that. I think if if you're running a business from a long period of time and you try to make it about yourself and you think about writing books and stuff like that, that's not a game I want to play. I'll be very happy when I go to look back, watch games, not have to have security for all the love I get from fans. Have life feel a little easier, not have to have a press conference in Philly where it was about 110 degrees
Oh, yeah.
a few weeks ago, Alejandro.
That was brutal.
But they built a new building and it's got AC,
it.
so you can hang out in the building in the future.
Yeah, we did. We spent a lot of time indoors and came out to give our speeches.
Well, we appreciate.
But hey, guys, thanks for what you guys are doing too, and thanks to U.S. Soccer. We need to do more of these kinds of things where we're part of the conversation. You know, that's what soccer, MLS, the national teams, we need to be part of the conversation more than we are. And that just happens with doing the work. So you guys are doing the work. I appreciate it.
We appreciate LAFC for signing Son right as we started so we could talk about it. So maybe we'll have you on for the next big signing and we'll do a whole conversation again. But thank you for taking the time. Thank you for chatting.
Take care, guys.
We'll talk to you again soon. Well, Ale, it sounds like we won't be standing next to Commissioner Don Garber wearing a USMNT kit, you know, at a game, drinking a beer in the stands. But we could run into him at Coachella or maybe another big music festival. That would be, I would have said that would have been a surprise, but now that we've talked to him, I guess not anymore.
No, absolutely. I love that. You know, we were able to get Commissioner Garber to open up a bit and you know, keep it lighthearted there at the end. And I love that. I was surprised to see him at Coachella, but I love to see it. I mean, I can just imagine him, you know, getting whether he's angry or so excited about the next expansion or whatever's happening across the league office. He's getting that energy out at Coachella. I loved it.
Yeah.
And a book recommendation as well. I got to get on that book, by the way.
You got to get on that book. And for anyone who hasn't listened to our previous episode, we talked with Hickory FC head coach and Vermont Careens sporting director. It is a lot like what that book is about, which is it doesn't matter how bright the lights are around the stadium. The soccer teams matter to the core of these communities, and it's really cool to hear that that's something that the commissioner is driving towards, because I think as soccer fans around the U.S., that's what we want the game to be. That's what we connect to. Many people from places they are from originally or places they've traveled to, and many people are looking to grow it and build it here in the United States. So thank you once again to the commissioner for taking the time to join us. Thank you to all of you for listening, and don't go anywhere because we've got a lot of great episodes coming up here at the U.S. Soccer Podcast. We'll be back next week with another big one.